The grass is always greener. It's a pretty interesting premise. Um, from my experience, it's almost entirely true. What I mean by this is that a lot of times I will encounter or run into people who will say, this place sucks, but once I get to another place, it's going to be better. And honestly, this is going to be a bit of a series of videos just about how folks feel about the industry in general, from my professional and from my personal experience, what I've seen and what I've experienced. But I wanted to kind of talk about this one specifically for now, because I think this one is a little bit more individual. You can see this with lots of people. People will feel this way a lot of the time. Not just with like our industry, but just in general from like life, you know. I moved around quite a lot in my life, and uh, you know, part of me is a bit of a nomad. I don't really get too caught up in what I think could be interesting about the places that we go to, or what's going to be bad. I'm pretty indifferent usually, but I feel that some people aren't. They will travel to one place and they can find a million things wrong with it, and that's just true for everywhere. And I think your perception can be your reality, right? Like whatever you perceive to be true will tend to be true. This is not some faux philosophy. This is generally what tends to happen to people, right? I'm sure many of you can immediately relate to what I'm talking about. And with the game industry, or film industry, or whatever you want to, whatever industry or whatever facet of your life that you are um, attached to, right? Whatever you want to like throw this premise onto, yeah, you'll find that this is generally a thing. Like you will start to believe that um, other studios do it better, or other companies will do it better because you only worked at this company, so you have really strong feelings. But then when you work at another company, you realize that they have problems, and it just becomes problems after problems everywhere you go. And you might think doing stuff for yourself, that's the true solution. And as somebody who's done things for themselves and have made tremendous failures here and there, I've come to appreciate just doing simple 9 to 5 contract work. I've come to appreciate what it's like to not have to manage large teams or small teams, just managing myself and what I can do. And sometimes it's basic contract work. It's a lot of fun for me because it's just simple, you know? And the grass is greener applies to even to yourself, not just the studio environment. So I've seen this happen, right? I have lots of friends who go through this. Like I remember I had a buddy, we were working at Blizzard, and he was like, "Oh, Blizzard sucks. They don't know how to do this and that and that and this." And at the time, I was working at Blizzard Cinematics, and I felt I just didn't agree with this. I was like, "This feels great." I think Blizzard was amongst one of my favorite places to work at. And that might sound shocking, especially to those of you who are probably looking at the current state of Blizzard. And perhaps there are more truth to that kind of statement now than maybe then. But to be fair, Blizzard's a massive company too. I worked specifically on the cinematics team, and the cinematics team, I have no notes. It was incredible. There were a couple moments where I probably could have had reasons to be upset, but honestly, I liked my position. I liked where I was, what I was doing. I ultimately left because again, I started doing my own stuff. That's like I think when my school took off, like my online mentorships for the first time, and it just like took off, and I realized I probably should just focus on this to see if I can kind of chase this dream, you know. No regrets because it's taught me a lot about myself, but yeah, it's just one of those things where, again, even with my own thing. I'm like, the grass is greener, grass is greener, you know? And I remember he was just going off on like what he didn't like about it and just all of the things. And I was like, okay, man. And so eventually he left the studio, which is perfectly reasonable. If you don't like the place, then I don't imagine why you would want to stay. Um, and and then he got a job at another big studio, and uh, would just message me telling me how he doesn't like this studio now, you know. And it just seemed like a pretty perpetual problem. Like one studio is not good enough, then the next studio isn't good enough. And honestly, I don't know too many places that one could find that you would just want to stay forever. There's very few places that I think make people feel this way. And the studio that he was at is one of those studios that I think a lot of people tend to love. And again, I'm going to kind of keep this relatively anonymous because I don't want people to follow breadcrumbs, you know? I don't want to make this person's complaints seem uh, ungrateful, you know? And, and, the studio, I feel people do have their complaints about too. I've heard them. I've seen it online. I've seen people who work there have their own complaints about this big studio. And it's like, yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of these studios, this is just how it is. A lot of people may like it. A lot of people don't like it. So it's the grass is greener, you know? Like everything feels better from the outside. And my attitude to a lot of this stuff is I just take them as I see them. You know, a lot of places that I've worked, I almost always have something that I can critique and feel that they can do a better job. But then I ultimately do mostly contract work, so I don't have a long enough time to even be mad about any place that I've stayed because I don't stay there very long. You know, even when I've worked for companies like Riot, pretty big company, I do a lot of their contract art direction work. They usually call me whenever they're working on a project and they don't have an available art director on staff. Usually they have like their own internal art directors, but they move people around quite a bit. And so they'll bring me on board to help them kind of solve the immediate problem of whatever project they're working on. Because usually they're working with the vendor. They need somebody like me. I can paint pretty quick. I can communicate pretty well. And so that really helps them in a bind, typically. So that's been great. That's been a fantastic experience. And I've had many opportunities with them doing this, and it has been always super enjoyable. I enjoyed working with these folks. But I've heard people not like working there either. I think I rarely have terrible experiences where I would harshly recommend a studio, right? Or recommend not to go to a studio. I typically will tell people why studios work the way they work, but at the end of the day, I have friends that work at almost every kind of studio you can imagine. Even the most notorious ones. I have friends who work there, and they like it. So it's hard for me to be like, don't go there. Everyone's different. Now, for me, oh, that looks kind of weird. Whoops. The anatomy is definitely weird and broken here, but I think I could fix it by moving the torso over, and then I'll just stick to the stylization of this. But to me, I think like students feel the same way. I think students will have this perspective of like, oh, once I get a job, then I will be happy, And then they get a job and they realize it does not fill the hole that they had inside their soul, And it's okay. I don't think that there's any other way to learn that sometimes other than just to experience it, the hand on the stove moment. But yeah, trust me, studio life isn't going to potentially fix all your problems. It might help you with some of your economic challenges, your financial issues, for sure. Like, duh. But I don't know if working for your favorite studio is going to be the thing that will change your life. that you might expect it to do. And that's the thing. That's the catch with the grass is always greener. This is affecting everything and everybody. I think this is the same truth with the political landscape. Like currently, as I'm recording this video, there's a lot of drama in American politics. I mean, it's been like this entire year, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. And I am not a fan of it. And it could have been less dramatic, but nonetheless, it still probably would have been dramatic one way or another, but definitely less dramatic. And as a consequence of this, is because, again, I think people believe that that a lot of these individuals that we try to put into these office and these administrations, politically speaking, can change your individual life like immediately. And there might be some truth to that in some instances and others, but to be honest, like think about what you're asking for. A lot of infrastructure and a lot of governance just takes tons of time, to rectify. And I don't know if any individual person can really solve a lot of these large scale challenges that we see as a species. Truly, it's just such a big problem to solve. And I don't know what the answer is, honestly. I genuinely am unsure. I know what answers I don't think are agreeable. Like this current administration, I have a lot of criticism for. Not just from an economic level, but also from a social level. Like I'm just like, there's just some things that we can overcome a little bit more immediately. But the grass is greener, right? Like I make a lot of my decisions and a lot of what I do in my life, not based on who's running the show, but what I have immediate control over, And I generally do not pay attention, especially even before 2016, I paid no attention to this stuff. And I think during 2017, I might have mentioned this. It was like probably the most unproductive year of my life because I was paying too much attention to it. Honestly, way too much attention. And I think now I'm paying the right amount of attention. I'm keeping my eye on the on the pulse because there are a lot of things that are shifting pretty quickly and it's worth paying attention to. But I navigate most of my decisions based off of what I have control over, not expecting that the grass is always going to be greener once this thing happens or when this moment happens. I think that's a flawed strategy because a lot of us don't have control over a lot of what's happening at a macro scale. And one of my favorite stories that I like to kind of think through, because, I have a small family, very big family, but very small, because I don't really I have lots of cousins and uncles and aunts, but I don't really know them very well. But all I have really is my parents and my wife's parents that, again, I hang out with not too often. And then just my kids and my wife. Like these are like my most immediate quote unquote family members. And there's a story about a soldier's dilemma where they're given the choice between fighting the Great War, which is a war worth fighting. It is the World War II against the Nazis, let's say. The war worth fighting, but their impact in that battle might not be as significant because they are one of many who sacrificed their lives to contribute to the ultimate victory that we may have had against the Axis, right? And the Nazis. Or stay back because you have your dying grandmother and you are her only family left. And if you go, then she'll be left alone to die alone. Right? So both of these causes are noble, but if you stay with the grandma, your impact will be so tiny on the global scale, but on that macro individual scale, because of your grandma, it has a huge impact to that person and to the people that are closer to you in your life. And I've had this position pretty widely, including the way I approach my students. Many of my students to this day still message me and email me and ask me questions, and I meet them at events and I talk to them. I have a very intimate relationship with the people I care about, like my students, my family, my friends. You know what I mean? And I even made a claim in a previous video that if I was ever to get quote unquote political, then I would do it by doing it. Then I would actually be going to war, right? Like I would be a soldier signing up to go to battle, right? Otherwise, I think my words just don't carry as much weight because, for one, I don't know enough about it to make meaningful statements. To be fair, I like to think that I am pretty knowledgeable, but honestly, the way that I got good at art was by doing it, and the way that I got good at explaining art and talking about art is by my experience of doing it, right? And so I feel that there is more to it than just kind of backseat politics. And I think a lot of people are doing that way too much, to the point where I actually genuinely believe the people that are in charge are kind of like the backseat designers, like the kind of people that have a lot of theories on what could work, but they have never truly put a lot of stuff to the test. And that's incredibly reckless in my mind. There's like a lot of this, you see this actually in the game industry. You see streamers who have this perspective of like they know what makes good games, because they comment on it all the time, which is fair. I think their criticism and their feedback is warranted, and it's generally allowed, right? Like you obviously can have whatever you want to say about whatever, and a lot of it's fair criticism, pretty valuable and constructive criticism. But a lot of times when I hear some of them, I also can recognize that they don't understand the challenges as well. Like there's a lot of challenges, and again, I'll probably be making a series. I'm going to probably make a lot of videos on why you see a lot of these challenges, kind of like open the door a little bit to that world so you guys have more understanding. But not understanding the challenges of it, and you see this often where some of these people then make their own game studios or publishing companies, and then immediately like run into literally, if not entirely, the same critiques that they had on the outside, but now they're doing it from the inside. And then you have a lot of people then commenting like look at them, like they've fallen into the corporate whatever they want to call it, greed of the industry. And it's just like this consistent perpetual challenge that you see over and over again, you know? And again, I think it's the grass is always greener type of thing. Like everybody has these strong opinions about where they're at. And if you could just do this, and if you could just do that, then it would be better. Then it would be obviously easier. Then it would be like this problem would be solved. That problem would be solved in my own life, and I'm kind of trying to make this video really comment on like, look, we only have one life to live. We only have the decisions that we can make today. If you have strong opinions about certain things that are going on, then understand that action only will be the solution to many of these things. Like really pushing yourself to do stuff to overcome whatever you think is the challenge is. So if you have this challenge of like you're seeing the industry, it's in shambles. You're seeing, let's say, this current administration do things that you feel is only going to make things worse, whether you believe that or not, right? If these are the things that are on your mind and you just feel hopeless, then you're, again, starting with that earlier premise, your perception will become your reality, right? And what I don't want to say with that claim is that things aren't happening. There are absolutely things happening in the world that are worth paying attention to and being skeptical and pessimistic about. I think that's fair. But at the end of the day, you have to find a good balance, right? You got to realize that the grass is going to get greener wherever you water, right? And if you water the plants that are on your front lawn, then there's a good chance that that will be your green grass that you're looking for. You know, you don't necessarily have to look for it somewhere else. And for me, I have navigated my entire life this way. I have always tried to pay attention to the things that are within my immediate control. I try to not let the things that are outside of my control distract me too much. Again, I don't mind that there are some distractions that come from whatever's happening around me, and it is worth paying attention to. Like, having situational and environmental awareness is incredibly important, obviously. But if it's all you do is just have that awareness, all you do is have just look how things are, and that's all you're doing, then you are driving yourself to be in a state of consistent and constant inaction. And a great example of somebody who I think adapted very well to a terrifying and devastating circumstance was one of my close friends lost his home. And he lost his home through the California fires. And it was bad. And they were going through it. They were really upset, obviously, for obvious reasons. But, seeing that a lot of people came through and really helped them out. And there was a lot of great donations. Thanks for those of you who may have donated to my friends. And at the end of the day, they found a new place. They got like a small little apartment. They're in talks of like rebuilding. And I was just chatting with him the other day, and I was just checking in because, he's my best friend and I want to make sure he's okay. And he's like, we're actually loving this new lifestyle. He said the kids like it a lot. Like, it's like this idea that they're not kind of tethered. There's something about that that's really helping them feel a little bit more free, and they're doing more interesting stuff. They're still talking about what it might mean to have a home, and to rebuild that life. But they were kind of open to this new lifestyle, this new world that's brought levity to them. They realize that as this is all being handled and sorted out, and eventually they'll get their home back, they're just like realizing the value of just being closer to each other, like their house was a lot bigger, so they had space, but because there's not as much space, they kind of have to be closer together because of where they're at. There's more places to go, so they do a lot of stuff just as a family, So sometimes something that might reveal itself to be a tragedy in time reveals itself to be a blessing, And let me be clear, I don't want to be naive here. Obviously, if you, let's say, walk down the wrong alley and get shot in the face, like, there's no lesson to be learned from that. So obviously there are some lessons best learned by, just caution and intelligence. But I'm just saying, if you are in this kind of perpetual state of caution and awareness, then that's also, in my mind, very, very tragic, And so this grass is greener thing. Are there studios that are great to work at? 100%. Are there studios that might make you happy and actually feel fulfilled? Absolutely. But I'm trying to say it's probably more unlikely than it is likely, because there's probably something bigger going on in your life and in your mentality that you might need to overcome that has almost nothing to do with how well or how poorly you do in the industry. And obviously, solve one problem at a time. If you feel the financial burdens is one of the bigger things that is contributing to a lot of your challenges, that's totally reasonable. Yeah, solve that. Get to it. But hopefully after listening to this video, when you've achieved that goal and you've reached that place, and I've had some students who've done this, who've reached those goals, and they responded, they got back to me and are like, you were right though. Like, I've been working here for several months and I'm already like finding ways to build my personal work and work on my own projects. I'm like, yeah, dude, totally. They said it didn't, it didn't fill that hole that they thought it might. And they are immediately already being proactive on their next steps, which is wonderful, And so for me, I want to make sure if you come across this video, again, that's like the biggest lesson I want you to take out of this. I did mention a couple of my own personal opinions about the current state of the world, and I don't want that to distract perhaps your perspective of what I'm trying to say to you. I'm not saying that the world isn't on fire. What I'm trying to say is, I mean, when is it not? You know, it's always been a struggle, at least from my perspective. And there have been years where it was way harder. I remember during the pandemic, that was very tough for me and my family, but we got through it. You know, I remember there was several moments in my career that have been pretty devastating to me and really have shaped me to be the kind of person I am today. And even recently, I was working on a really good project with a really good team, but I just wasn't able to keep up because I was working a couple other contracts, and I just prioritized wrong, and I accidentally and indirectly lost that opportunity. It was really upsetting. I was like, oh man, I really like this project. I wish I could have really stuck on it. It wasn't anything huge. It was just like contract work. But because I was like doing all the other contract work and I was just like trying to finish that stuff, I just like lost track of that one. And yeah, that still happens to me. It still happens to me even to this day, you know? And so I think it's really important for people to recognize this. And I think that once you start to pay more attention to things you have control over, you'll just be happier, generally speaking, in your day to day. Other than that, hope you guys had a good day and a good week. I know, especially the recording of this video, especially if you're American, there's just a lot of stuff to be sorting out. And I just started thinking like, what can I say that could be pretty helpful advice regardless of people's positions on the world affairs? Because I really am out here to try to stay positive and help people. There are plenty of video content out there, y'all, that can lead you down all of the things you should be worried about. I'm trying not to be one of those videos. There are definitely an abundance of those types of that type of content. Feel free to engage in that content if you feel you have to. I can't lie, I definitely engage in that type of content because, again, I think awareness is totally reasonable. But I am not trying to be that content creator. I'm trying to be the one that's balancing the odds here, you know? But anyway, appreciate you guys. Again, thanks for all the freaking support. I've been getting lots of great messages and emails from people. Dude, it's very inspiring. You guys have been an incredible inspiration to me and motivation to me. Talk about grass is greener. This is green grass. I feel like this grass is growing nice and green. A lot of the responses have been incredibly positive, and I just can't thank you guys enough. Like, it's really motivating. It's really good for me therapeutically. Like, I feel like I'm helping people, and my love language is service. So that's it makes me feel very fulfilled. And so keep up the positive comments. It really does help me a lot. But with that being said, I'll do my part and try to stay positive too. I want to give you guys some more kind of like behind the curtain inside of the industry. And honestly, there is more darkness probably in some of the stuff I might have to talk about, like why it's so challenging. I don't mean like, maybe darkness is not a good word, but like it's tough. It's a tough business. But I want to kind of walk you through why and what's reasonable to me and what I think could be changed and worked on as an industry. And again, this is my personal perspective and my professional perspective. I am almost certain there's a lot of people that have strong disagreements with these types of perspectives. And honestly, I think it's fair to have these types of conversations. But I will always try to end it with something positive and something that's uplifting and what can be done about it that moves us forward rather than just talk trash all day. I think, again, that's a little bit abundant of content. And honestly, I think it's easier. It's easy to talk about all the problems. It's hard to find all the solutions. So anyway, yeah, keep an eye out for those videos. Hope you guys enjoy this painting. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys when I talk to you. Yeah, I don't like this arm at all, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it imperfect. Grass is always greener, y'all.